Hi everyone, I'm Catherine Weaver, and today I'm going to be talking you through one of the methods I use when I have an error in the band that I'm weaving. Now, this method is particularly helpful if you have a mistake that is more than a few picks behind where you're currently working on the band. Now, as an example, we're going to be using a band I wove as a practice piece when I was working on my book Tablet Weaving in Theory and Practice, Double Face Inscriptions. I was basing the letters in that book on a specific printed Psalter from 1457. So I was trying to match the shapes of my letters to the source as much as possible. Now, I wove this capital X and I decided around about halfway through capital Y that I really wasn't happy with the X. So I decided to take it out and reweave that section of the warp. Firstly, I pushed the warp threads to either side and exposed the weft in the middle. Then normally the weft is covered or mostly covered by the warp threads. Next, I used a very sharp pair of embroidery scissors to carefully cut the exposed weft threads. Now you need to be really careful at this point that you don't accidentally nick any of the warp threads, because that will cause a weak point and make them more likely to break. And it is entirely possible to fix a broken warp thread, but it's a little bit of work, and if you can avoid it, then it's sensible to do so. Next, I used a pair of tweezers to pull out all of those cut pieces of weft. You don't strictly have to use a pair of tweezers, but I was working with a very fine yarn for this band, and I was having trouble grabbing the tails with my fingers. Now, as you can see, we have quite a lot of twist in the warp threads at the moment, especially at the selve edges. So that's the threads at the top and the bottom. Now, this means that it's not ready to weave, or in this case, it's not ready to unweave the last few picks of that letter. So to get rid of that twist, I turned the tablets in the opposite direction to the twist until the twist was removed, and I could see the last piece of weft in the shed without any threads covering it. And that's what this looks like. As you can see, we've got lots of lovely straight warp threads with no twist in them. So for the last few picks, I unwove them, by which I mean I turned the tablets in the opposite direction to the way I did when I wove those pieces. I like to always unweave the last few rows to get back to the point where I want to start, because stripping out the weft like that can distort the band a little, and I want to avoid that if possible. Next, I reached a point where I was ready to start again, so I needed to join on a new piece of weft. At this point, I lay the new weft and the old weft in the shed together, leaving a tail of maybe 4 or 5 centimeters of the new weft sticking out at the edge of the band. Then for the next few picks, I weave with both the new weft and the old weft until I get to a point where I'm happy that the new weft has been secured. So you'll need to do this for a few extra picks if your yarn is particularly slippery, but for something fairly sticky like wool, you can get away with 1 or 2 picks at the most. And that leaves a tail of the old weft sticking out at the selvage. And later on, I'll come back with a pair of scissors and carefully clip the old weft tail and the new weft tail. And this is what the final letter looked like on this practice band. It wasn't the letter that I ended up going with, because the shape still wasn't quite what I wanted it to be, but it was a lot closer. to the source material. Right, so I hope this has been helpful, and if you would prefer a written version of this tutorial, I've put a link to it in the notes at the bottom of the video, and you can also visit my blog for more advice and techniques for tablet weaving. So thank you for watching, everyone, and happy weaving!